What is 3CX? It's voice over IP, so it's VoIP software. We're not going to get too deep into the weeds of 3CX itself. What I wanted to start with really is to say when this threat emerged in a handful of days, you can see the stat there, we issued a butt ton of reports. That's a technical term. And if you see the point of comparison, we essentially sent a whole month's worth of reports in a handful of days about one specific threat. And what was amazing about this is, yes, it was automated, but it was semi-automated because it was the personnel at Huntress who kind of pushed this along. They did the research. So I want to tell that story a bit. I want to flesh this out, talk about the 3CX supply chain compromise, talk about our EDR. I also want to talk about the personnel. And every time Topher's like, hey, you got to talk about how cool we are. And it's cool. We have some seriously awesome people. So yeah, so that stat is just to be like, hey, like the whole security community really rallied to this. But I just want to talk a little bit about how Huntress did it. So Topher, if you'd bump us to the next slide, my man. Thank you. So what you can see on the screen are the reports that we issued. And I take a lot of pride in our reports. Our reports are designed for you to be able to read them and pass them to your co-workers, to your boss. They are not so technical that you have to be like, shoot, I have to summarize this before I send it on. And so if you can, it's quite a small font to be perfectly fair, but if you take a look at that report, what we do is we just break down, hey, here's the description of the threat. Here's how we've definitely determined that this is a threat. And here's what we'd advise that you go and do next. And all our reports kind of follow that formula. But what I really liked about 3CX is I got to see how complex the backend was. I got to see that it took, essentially 1,000 pages worth of research to condense that down into what is essentially 10 lines. That's, yeah. You don't get that everywhere. And there are some security vendors, by the way, who were sending essays. And I don't know about you, Topher. I don't really read 100-page reports. I skim them, if that. So one of the cool things about 3CX is we distilled down as much information as we could when we reported. But we do this for everything. That's what I take a lot of pride in making sure every report that we send is quality controlled. So when it doesn't meet the standard, we review it, and it's so rare that it doesn't meet the standard. Topher talked about a 0.7% false positive rate. That's because we roll our own, we curate our own detections, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I wanted to talk a little bit about before we can weaponize our EDR against adversaries, we have to know what we're about to push out. Again, we roll our own, but what that also means is if we get it wrong, there's cascading impact, and we don't get it wrong. So we put a lot of effort in. So what you're seeing in the top left of the screen is you're seeing a Slack chat. And these are some of the best security researchers in the game. I know because I work with them. I'm not sure what I'm doing there. I think they just needed a mascot. But you had people staying up for hours and hours, burning the midnight oil. You had John Hammond, you had Matthew Brennan, you had Sharon Martin, you had all these names. You had Jamie Levy, you had Arden Carver, you had all these people. And what were they doing? What they were dissecting what was actually going on. Because here's the problem. When a security vendor says, hey, we've identified a threat, it isn't that I don't trust them. I trust them, right? There's no such thing as competitor threat intel that I won't value, but we need to validate it before we push this out into our community. And so what you could see on the right of the screen is a breakdown from Matthew Brennan. Matthew Brennan is a reverse engineer. He's a brilliant colleague. And he kind of breaks down what exactly went down with 3CX. So I'm going to do a higher level overview, but 3CX was subject to a supply chain compromise. So what that means is somewhere upstream, it had been poisoned. The downstream effect of that meant that once it was subject to an update, it slept for a little while, and then it started to pull down additional malicious tooling. What's really cool about this is it slept for about a week. And so this is why you have EDR, right? Like that's AV is going to be like, oh, maybe, but probably not because it's sleeping for a week. And then it went and pulled additional tooling. And now we're super fortunate that, yes, the APT behind it maybe wasn't as sophisticated as we think. Maybe the APT behind this was burned earlier than they expected. Or potentially, maybe there are profound impacts of this that the community isn't aware of. It doesn't really matter. The point is, we didn't know. We didn't know how bad was this going to be. And so we really ramped it up. And what I really like about this visual that you can see here is it's so simple. It really distilled down, again, a butt ton, technical term, of work that was done by Huntress personnel. Now, what a lot of people also don't appreciate is the C2s there. A lot of them were calling out, the payloads were downloaded from GitHub. It was our John Hammond who reached out to GitHub and said, hey, can we pull that repo down? can we neutralize this threat so that it can't continue to access its offensive security tool? And now, of course, there were other locations that the adversaries could have gone to. But it's just another example of we're looking out for the community. We're looking out for people that don't pay for us, right? We could have very easily advised people, hey, just block these things here. Don't tell anybody. But we're not like that. We're just like, it's easier for us to just share because we love it. I'm Topher, if you would mind bumping us to the next slide.
Just want to toss out some definitions for someone who might be on here that's a little less technical. So APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, those are guys that are like, big names in the hacking world. So you're thinking like nation state sponsored hackers or large cyber criminal organizations, that sort of thing. So APTs are the people that are behind some of the largest hacking efforts. And Dray also threw out their C2, command and control, like how people control the malware from a distance. Very short definition, but just want to toss those couple things out there for people who may not as be technical as you, Dray.
Thank you, Topher. You keep me honest and I appreciate it. And so what you're seeing there is a screenshot, just a little extract of what our EDR screen will look like. It generally will look similar to what you guys see, but I wanted to show you what we see as ThreatOps analysts. And so you can see there, we've got it in bright red. We've got it in bright red, and we're saying, hey, this is a 3CX detector. When that detector fires, what you're seeing there is a process tree, right? And that is showing, and you can see it in bright red, when something along that process tree doesn't add up, it's anomalous. Now, this is something that I love, because you can have machine learning if you want. It's great. But it doesn't beat nice, dumb human interaction, right? And so what you can see on the screen right there with that process tree is a human can go, yes, something isn't adding up. This process shouldn't be spawning that process. Something is anomalous. And our detectors do that, and a human validates it. And so we can't go into too much detail on exactly what we did to detect this. I've been told, Topher's been told, we can't tell you too much. But what I can tell you is that we did something that I can't tell you. That's when you know it was cool. But we did this as an out-of-band commitment to our community. All right. It was something that we knew was right. Even though the agent wasn't yet ready for what we did it anyway, because it was important. And so once this detector was good, we then started to wonder, well, that's the EDR portion carried out for our community. Can we expand this across any of our other telemetry queues? And so, Topher, if you bump the next one, what you see is that when Windows Defender was able to start being like, hey, something isn't adding up about 3CX here, we were able to say, right, Defender, every time that happens, tell us. And so with Defender, I think we do a really good job with managed AV of curating the detections. Because sometimes Defender do be junk, right? It's going to say, oh, goodness, this is a cryptocurrency scam. And you're like, it's just a bank statement. So we don't want to see that. You don't want to see that. So what we instead do is we curate the Defender detection. So we are getting the finest of the finest. This is another example of that. And so when you start to kind of look at this constellation of 3CX, yes, we weren't the first people on the scene, but I'm going to be honest, we did it better because we made sure that even if you didn't, so let's just say you weren't running managed AV. Okay, fine. You weren't going to get those Defender detections, but our EDR was going to catch it up. Hey, if you were running managed AV and we had a full stack, it was getting caught at the Defender stage a day or two later, a handful of hours later. And our EDR didn't even need to, it could continue to be like, okay, fine, Defender caught it. We're all good. So that's one of the benefits of rolling Huntress. Some people in chat are saying, hey, are you compatible with this? Sure. But if you have us across the board, we're catching adversaries much earlier in their operation. And that's so important because if I catch an adversary here, they've done less damage. That's less work for you. That's the benefit of Defender. Our EDR is going to catch them, sure. But Defender can sometimes catch the what's a polite word? The numbskulls a lot earlier.
Yes. First thing that Dray said is, yes, we did some things that we didn't get permission to talk about outside of context because maybe there's something a little more long-term on our roadmap and we're not, there where we're willing to admit that yet. But I do want to talk about even the things that we can't talk about. I'm constantly surprised by our ThreatOps team's ability to build full pictures out of context based on things beyond our EDR solution, right? I mean, they can look at things like all of the sysmon information, they can retrieve files, do reverse engineering on those files and everything along those lines. So I do want to hit that too, that we're looking at things beyond what we talked about as far as just an EDR solution. We can build massive pictures just based on context and additional information and data points that we have available to us. I also want to highlight that even though, as Dray pointed out, we weren't the first, technically that was CrowdStrike, and I'm going to alert them, even though sometimes where we were the first and they just put you as a footnote and didn't tell you who you were, Dray. But I will give credit to them because they were the first to alert on it. But we have the best material out there. And I challenge you to find better material on 3CX. We already posted those in our chat, but we have the best, most comprehensive material on 3CX out there. And that's true credit to our team and all those people that stayed up really late. So that's me holding you hostage for this slide. I'll move on, Dray.
So if you go for the next slide as well, Topher. So what you can see here is somebody asked, hey, I think it was Benjamin. Benjamin said, hey, are you 24/7? We are, Benjamin. And one of the cool things is we make sure there's symmetry of senior, principal, managers across everywhere. But the one thing that I personally, again, am passionate for is a uniform service. There should be no difference between the service that UK personnel offer and Australian personnel offer. And our commitment to that for 3CX was to put together an internal investigation guide. A lot of security vendors aren't going to share this with you. They're not going to tell you they do this because they're like, oh, our team used telepathy to figure this out. No, of course not. You have standard ways of doing things. And so what we're very good at is ensuring that our 24/7 commitment to security is uniform, is tight, it's good. And so Benjamin, when you were saying, have you got folk? I'm like, oh yeah, we got folk. We got folk all over the world and they operate at the highest capability possible because we put effort into investigation guides and they're very good. Sometimes they're better than the investigation guides that I put together, to be fair.